All right, welcome Cyber Insecurity. I am pumped for this evening's live stream. My name is Joel Bork. I will be your host for this evening's episode of Uncover Cyber, where not only do we get to interview somebody incredible, but we get to dive into the platform that they're literally building for the cybersecurity community. And tonight we're jumping in with a threat intelligence platform that deals with deep analytics and orchestration and pairs all of that together in a cool, collaborative, intuitive set of workflows. That's the QuoLab platform. So with me today is a gentleman who's spent 9 years with the Air Force working as a hunt and blue team cybersecurity specialist. And thank you for your service, sir. He also spent almost 6 years after that working for the DoD, right? And he's now the CEO of QuoLab. So I'm super, super excited. Everyone, please give it up for Dan Young.
Thank you very much, Joel. I appreciate it there.
Absolutely. Glad to have you. Once again, everybody in the audience, this is Dan Young. Please, as we go throughout tonight's episode, it is rare to get CEOs on the line, so please get in your questions, right? If it's about his experience in the past, if it's about the product he's bringing to the cybersecurity community, that's what this community is all about, is getting questions answered. So that's why we're here. So excited to have you, Dan.
Thank you. Likewise. Very, very excited to be here, and thank you for the invite.
Absolutely. And thanks for rushing to the office. I heard it was a little noisy at home.
Yeah, I was originally going to be doing it from home, and then, you got a 7-year-old and other things going on, so they say, hey, it's time to get out of there. I got some crazy looks from my wife when she saw me put on my QuoLab shirt, and I told her, it's a shout out to Joel. He promised his wife he's going to wear that the old jacket, so I'm representing as well, brother.
I had to find the only shirt I had orange on. I'm like, all right, QuoLab.
Thank you.
Let's see that QuoLab shirt real quick, though, because we're going to be bringing that back in a bit. There it is. All right,
there
cool.
It is. Yep.
If you like that shirt, pay attention here for a little bit. Dan has generously donated 3 to this live stream that we're going to be giving away here this evening. So before we dive right in, I want to throw out a few thank yous. First of all, thank you to our executive producer, Neil Bridges. We would not be here without you, so thank you, Neil. If you guys haven't connected to Neil on LinkedIn, please do so. He makes all this happen. Also, thanks to our moderator, Sec IT guy. Once again, if you haven't connected with him on Discord, fantastic resource. He also live streams on here. And thank you to the other members of the QuoLab team who made tonight possible.
Absolutely.
All right. With that, let's jump right into this, Dan. Our moderator, by the way, he'll be feeding me questions from the audience. I'll be working those in, so they could be about your experiences in the past, what made you start your own company, and all the above. Everything's free game to this community. Deal?
Fantastic. Rapid fire. I love it.
Let's rock. So Uncover Cyber, it's here to take cybersecurity products, which are many times misunderstood, right? Sometimes the reviews are pay to play, or they're just these, oh, not that one, magic boxes, right? In special quadrants that we're supposed to just understand. So we're going to uncover the inner workings of QuoLab here today, and the audience will be asking the question. So without further ado, let's dig into QuoLab. Dan, what makes QuoLab something to be reckoned with?
So QuoLab addresses a significant gap for operators that exists. Whether you're a reverse engineer, cybersecurity expert working in a SOC, like specifically tier 2 through 3 and 4, or if you're an incident responder, there is a significant gap in the market right now in providing a framework that allows operators to truly manage, monitor, and hunt for threats in a holistic manner across all their different data silos, organizational constraints, and so forth.
You're not wrong. You are not wrong, right? So being on the blue team myself, we do see those issues within our community. So I'm really excited to take a peek. Dan, this is my first time seeing your product as well. Mm-hmm. So I'm really excited to dig into this. This is going to be a lot of fun. So thank you for telling us how you're different. This is our SOAR series, so we are lining up a number of SOAR platforms, and you get to go toe-to-toe with them. So you ready?
I'm absolutely ready. And yep.
Let's do it. So throw up your screen real quick. I know you wanted to kind of lay some groundwork before we jumped right into the tool.
Sure. You want me to give a little background on myself and why I came to be here? What's happening, over the last journey of my life? Like you kind of gave a great synopsis of like a CV resume kind of approach. So the time that I spent both in the Air Force and working out of Fort Meade and serving in a variety of different roles, both as an incident responder, a blue teamer, digital forensics guy. So I actually cut my teeth as a digital forensics investigator, I guess you could call it, working with a lot of the boys out of Fort Bragg and Tampa and other areas, so like SOCOM elements in the desert. So back in Iraq and other places in those areas, going against Al Qaeda at the time, and then after that ISIS targets. And I wasn't the guy with a gun. I was the guy with the nerd with the push-up glasses, kind of going, you guys raided this house, you got all this great intel, what can we glean from it? And then having to extract all that data and then push it forward to partners and other organizations, right, that needed to consume that information. The same thing then applied, same TTPs, the tools and tactics and procedures that you're using to do that data or those types of acquisitions and analysis are very similar to what incident responders do. So I spent a lot of time on incident response teams, CPTs, cyber protection teams is what they're called for the U.S. military or U.S. Cyber Command. Really fantastic group of people over there, right? And the work that they're tasked with doing is not, what Hollywood and others would make it seem to be as nefarious, right? Strictly and straight up, they're just trying to protect the domain space. If it's a .gov, .mil domain space, they're out there trying to do their best to protect insofar as with the tools that they have. And a lot of the tools that they're using, believe it or not, are open source off the shelf. I'm a huge believer and a big fan of a lot of open source technologies. If there's any digital forensics guys like myself in the threat, bulk extractor is one really good tool, or scalpel, some of these old tools, right, that we've been using for many years. Those are the tools that we're using on both sides of the fence, right? And the reality is great tools, great people, but there's a disconnect that kept coming up in those mission spaces, right? And that is, how do I translate the data that I have into human readable format? It's not really cool to put up in a big boardroom meeting or, walk in and brief your commander or, one-star general and say, here, sir, take a look at these, tables and rows on this Excel spreadsheet, right? And it's not going to cut it. So there is other tools out there, like Maltego does a kick-ass job of doing that. Sorry. Try to keep it PG-13.
No worries. Not for kids.
Veteran. So I'm a little bit off cuff here. So, so we had all these different visualizations that needed to be handled in reporting functionality, and then also case management to be able to historically track back and say, how do I know about what I know? We really didn't have that capability in the operational space that I was in. And specifically, we didn't have that capability with a platform that we could give to other people, like our partners. So if you're thinking like NATO partners, right? It's really hard to take government software and tooling and say, here, let's just open source this, or let's give it out here so others can use it. And now we have a framework to communicate and exchange. So there is really good tools like Splunk that are out there doing database exchanges, and they're, cloud delivery and a whole bunch of other options to be able to get data from point A to point Z. And then there's other data tools like Elasticsearch, right, that are very flexible, configurable by the users. But then again, individual organizations keep tailoring and tweaking those tools. That leaves a gap, though. How do they communicate on and pass that data back and forth? So that's where the genesis of QuoLab came from. And QuoLab is a data platform, right, that fuses, analyzes, investigates, enriches, right, and then produces finished intelligence out to partners and organizations both up and down the chain. So it's a unified data platform. It's a variety of different delivery mechanisms. We can get into that here in a second. I don't want to steal the thunder. You told me 2 slides, so I'm going to try and keep it to that limit. Yeah. But as a whole, that's one of the incredibly frustrating things that both in the corporate sector, the peers that I've talked to, as well as the government sector, at the end of the day, when you're a malware reverse engineer and you're working in your data zone and with your tools and all that, now how do I integrate and ingest the data that's coming from my threat intelligence team, right? And then how on top of that do I have, how do I get a concise ability outside of Microsoft Word where I can put up a nice published, finalized, serialized report that others can use to reference the work that we've done, the great, awesome stuff that we've uncovered, as well as then have that as a reference point I can track back live in a real manner. So we're going to get into that in the platform. I'm going to show you guys how we're doing it. But the use case, the need case is QuoLab is a threat intelligence platform. So when you go through and look at this, you'll see the tip functionality in there. And it's also a SOAR, security orchestration automation response, right? But we don't really particularly focus hard in the SOAR space. I know this is a SOAR conversation. We partner very well with other SOAR platforms. I don't want to start name dropping out there, but connectors and interactions with them are definitely our bread and butter as an integrator. But we're a step above the, the automation, ticketing, and all that. We're a little bit a layer above that, administratively speaking, and also technically speaking, where you can do case management. You can properly sort out, track threat actors. You can track incidents and events, and then you can start pushing that data back down to those other tools for both enrichment, for sourcing, for ticketing, for actioning, and so forth.
That's awesome. Dan, real quick, I gotta break it up a little bit.
Yeah, I know.
Profanity is totally fine on this channel. It is a 18+ channel, so I want you to do fair.
Roger that.
Okay. We do have a couple questions that I think tie really nicely into. So thank you for giving us your background and why you're here, and from the forensics to literally becoming a CEO to solve the problems you saw while in the field is fantastic. So one of the questions was, did you expect to end up where you are today?
That is a resounding no. That whoever asked that fantastic question, by the way. I started out, I cut my teeth. I started out in computer science for my degree way back many moons and years ago, right? Don't let my baby face fool you. I'm hitting 40 this year, so old ass is starting to catch up on me here.
Could have said 23, man. I would have believed you.
Yeah, right, brother. So when I started back out in this, I signed up in 9/11 was a big, huge factor for especially folks of our generation for joining and serving. And I wanted to be, I have a multilingual background, having been raised in Europe. I was raised abroad before I became a man. That was one of the things that happened.
What do you speak? What other languages?
Spanish and Albanian.
Okay.
So my wife is actually Albanian. Yeah. So a little trivia there for people too. So yeah, was raised overseas, and then I was like, okay, I'm going to join the Air Force and be a linguist. I was like, I know they probably could use some Spanish or Albanian, and they're like, sure, we could use that. So I joined, and what do? They said, you're going to go be an Arabic linguist. I'm like, well, shit, not exactly my cup of tea, but let's try it. So went to DLI, learned Arabic, and then they kicked me over the fence and said, by the way, as soon as I got to Fort Meade, still in Air Force, right? They said, wait a minute, you have a computer science background and you know languages, we're going to kick you into the forensic side. And at the time, I literally had no clue what that meant. So 15 years ago, Dan Young had no clue what being a forensics analyst meant. I really quickly learned what that meant and learned to love it, enjoy it. To those that are still serving in that capacity, I absolutely tip my hat to them. Both law enforcement has a tremendous amount of them doing that. And one of the interesting things to me, having served on that side and now on the cybersecurity side, where it's more like C&D, computer network defense focused, is the amount of crossover is amazing between those two career field sectors, with the one huge freaking exception, and that is the mental health drain that you experience on the computer, the more LEO, law enforcement oriented type forensics and stuff. So huge shout out to those guys who are guys and gals who are still serving in those capacities, whether for law enforcement or military. It's a awesome critical field. But yeah, did I ever expect to freaking end up as a CEO of a small startup? No. And I'll tell you one thing too, being a young 20-some-year-old person looking at CEOs going, that's a badass job, right? I want to do that. Sitting in the seat now, holy hell, I had no idea what I was opening myself up to. It's awesome, but you're a jack of all trades. I'm on the sales team, I'm on the dev team, I'm on the you name it, I'm doing it, and it's a riot of a time. But we're only CEOs in any organization, right? And Joel, I'm sure you've experienced this also with where you work, right? You're only as good as the team that you have. And I have been incredibly blessed with a very fantastic team of both business people, developers, people really that just are not comfortable with doing things with the status quo. And they're okay with kicking over nest and uncovering things and doing things a little bit more different. One of the different ways, for example, that we do things is our entire platform is built in Python 3, with the exception of the user interface, which is React, right? Python's really not that good for UIs, but the back end, all in Python 3. And why? Because as an operator, one of the things that pissed me off was not knowing what a tool that I'm using is doing. And I said, give me the ability to pop the hood on that sucker. I want to look in the engine. I want to see what is your graph data model doing? What are you doing? Your automation pipelines? What is your connector framework and all these other things? So let me decide whether or not it's meeting my organizational objectives. Let me make my modifications and tweaks, right? And then kick it back over the fence. So there's a little bit of that DNA, right? From me coming from the open source side and using those tools in that arena into how I've built QuoLab and where we're going with it as a platform.
I love it. Now, are you actually going to show us how you pop the hood a little bit today?
I will show you. I'm going to show you our REST API if you want to see that. But I'm not going to dive into the ones and zeros on it. I'm happy to do that for anybody who wants that afterwards, though.
Deal. Okay. So
once again, more importantly, I'm happy to do that with the right person on the line other than Dan. So when you become a CEO, that's another one of the sad parts, right? You become a little bit disconnected from the tech itself. I'm hardcore user, in the operational stance, but I have much better, smarter people that can answer those questions.
Fantastic. And so once again, if you guys haven't connected with Dan Young, CEO of QuoLab, Sec IT guy, if you'll throw his LinkedIn in the chat, reach out to this gentleman, connect, follow him. He's doing really big stuff in the space. So awesome. We got a couple more questions. I'm going to ask a couple more, but we got to get into the content. We got to get into the giveaways. We don't have all evening, or else we would have brought on some drinks and had a good time. So you ready for another one?
Yes, sir.
So as I mentioned, we have a wide range of individuals. I mean, we have from entry level in cybersecurity watching you tonight. We have VPs and CISOs who join this stream as well. One of the questions was from one of our more introductory level cybersecurity analysts. Mm-hmm. As a CEO, how important do you think it is to bring people without work experience into your team, teach them and train them so they can grow in your company?
Incredibly valuable, and I'll tell you two places where I've struck gold doing exactly that. My CFO is Alan Meseral. Look him up on LinkedIn as well. He's a great guy. Him and I have been business partners for quite a few years in real estate. So I have multiple interests, as many people. We're all eclectic, and we like to go down. I'm not a real estate guy. I mean, I'm not a stock guy. I don't do shares, stocks, and all that stuff. I do what I can touch, tangible assets. So I do real estate. And working with Alan Meseral, who has a property management company in Baltimore, Maryland, and we're headquartered in Maryland. I've been a client of his for about 8 years. And when I launched QuoLab back in 2019, I said, Alan, I got a proposition for you. I'm not telling you to drop everything and run over, but I need a CFO and I need a COO and I need somebody that knows people and doesn't know tech. And Alan not only came on board and has revolutionized the company for better. He's also been hugely instrumental in bringing on less than traditional sales type approaches, how we engage clients and how we engage prospects. And he might kick me in the ass if I reveal here how he does it, but he's taking old school real estate concepts of just knocking on doors, calling people up, and pounding the streets, applying that here, and we're getting fantastic results with people that we probably never would have engaged with before because they didn't happen to buy the right ticket to the right conference or right virtual representation or whatever, right? So
absolutely, that's fantastic. Yeah. Story. Also, question: what does he charge a month percentage wise of your rent?
What does
property management company? What does he charge a month?
Oh,
yeah.
Well, again, he'll kick I'm getting a preferred discount of 9%. So
that's pretty good.
Hey, if you're looking for that in Maryland, in the Maryland area, he's phenomenal. MH Properties is the company name, but yeah, he's a good old boy, and him and I have a riot of a time. But not only is he's digging into the tech and he's coming up with questions. The devs are going, oh, I never thought about it that way, because he's seeing problems based off his background, right? Not being in the field. Now, I will say, I will temper that with saying that I've also made some mistakes in that area by hiring the wrong people. One of the ways that I made a couple mistakes on hiring people was bringing in developers without a passion for cybersecurity. So, a lot of times you think developers are developers, and for some products, I think that's cool. That could be very true, right? But if you're in a platform like QuoLab, where you have to build data connectors, and those data connectors directly impact how successful QuoLab is at visualizing and/or presenting data to users, you got to have a little bit of an interest in the cybersecurity space as well. So I made a couple mistakes, bringing on the wrong members in the past, and some of them have since moved on, and other ones have actually been like, okay, this is cool. I need to change my gearing mentally and professionally to be able to embrace this. But yeah, overall, I would absolutely say bringing in people from a different background is hugely beneficial.
Yeah, the diversity is really key. But that was an interesting. I love how you brought that around to, well, okay, they may be experienced, but where do their passions lie? Because I see that, right? We have, I work with a great team of data scientists. Some of them are like, cybersecurity, meh. I'm still saying they're great data scientists, right? They've stuck with us for years, but you got to at least learn some of it to understand what
you kind of got to breathe it.
Yeah, that's it. Well, cool. We got a couple more questions, but they are product focused. So let's jump in real quick. If you have these couple slides, let's knock them out real quick so we can get prepped for this. Check out your tool.
All right. So do I have the ability to share here?
Yep.
Okay.
So share it, and then I'll throw it back up. Let me follow up on this one. Awesome. So for those of you who are asking questions, thank you so much. We do have a swag giveaway. If you are just tuning in, with me is Dan Young, CEO of QuoLab. He is actually rocking the shirt. He's trying to throw up. I told him 2 slide maximum so we can, there it is. Thank you, Dan. So we can get into his product, unveil it, show you guys exactly what it's made of, and dig into it. And let's let you ask questions about it as we go. So Dan, you ready?
I'm ready, sir.
Here we go. So talk to me about this.
So what you're seeing right now is the challenges, right, that QuoLab is meant to address. And a lot of these challenges I don't think are, especially when you're starting out in cybersecurity, they may not be as overtly obvious on the top. But as you progress through your career, that's why originally when I said more like SOC tier 2, 3 guys or gals, right, that are using their tooling and systems, they're the ones that are going to look at QuoLab and say, oh my God, I get it. I see why you built that thing, right? And these are the pain points that maybe I have been complaining about a long time and I didn't maybe articulate in this direct way. Fragmented threat operations is a real problem across organizations. My experience in the government sector, hugely, I can definitely attest to that, right? And that's because of, again, the TTPs are different, the techniques and procedures, the tools that you're using, and then the reporting guidelines that just create destructive data silos, right? Some are using Splunk, some are using Elastic, some are using Excel, some are using email, and you don't have that ability to converge and unify all that data into one place. And then the communication disconnects. How are you representing your data? How are you pushing that data up to other players, right? You're up the chain, right? How is the CISO or your ISM or your board, how are they being able to consume and view, visualize, and understand what you're telling them is a super important threat if it's being buried on maybe a generic dashboard and they don't have it in their hand? I mean, I can't tell you how important it is to be able to sometimes print off something that is incredibly important and just hand it to somebody and have them read it, maybe sitting across from you at a table, right? And then you can actually have their attention focused on that instead of sending them an email with a screenshot from a dashboard, right? 2 totally different kind of concepts and structures. And then obesity of data that is encountered within threat intelligence. It's one thing to have access to a huge repository of threat intelligence, and there's other tip providers out there that are providing fantastic data. But unless you can connect and tie that data to your internal security stack, your SIEM, your IDS, your EDR, right, and your firewalls, and say, where does this intersection actually happen? What am I missing? What am I seeing, right? And how can I now then communicate this if it's down the chain or laterally, right? How do I go to my IT security staff and say, please blacklist the following IP addresses that we've seen communicating and beaconing out on our systems, right? Or please update the following rules because, or block the following ports and so forth, because this attack keeps happening. We've seen it hit our partners and we've seen it hit ourselves, right? And then lastly, that restricted operating guidelines, that was, if you're tuning in from Europe and I say GDPR, you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about, right? And unless you've been living under a rock in cybersecurity, you're also going to understand what I'm talking about when I say data privacy. And one of the big things that we're seeing especially in the financial sector, and also pretty much all over Europe because of new laws that have come out in 2019 and 2020, is it's no longer cool to be able to hire a company, say QuoLab, if we're a SaaS platform, right? It's no longer cool to be able to hire us and say, hey, I'm going to ship you all my log data and I'm going to ship you all my other information. I want you to process it, check it, and then come back and tell me this is bad, this is good, this is what you need to worry about. Because that's a violation of their operational constraints or operating guidelines, right? And so the SaaS model where a service provider holds the system and then you give them your data and then they give you some awesome intel or awesome feedback back is not really going to be working moving forward. And that is also critically important if you're in the government space and you're working in maybe air-gapped enclaves, or if you're working in organizations that maybe might have some basic internet connectivity, but they might not have it all the time. What happens when you're in a field type environment and you don't have the best internet access, and you may have a laptop with you and that's the only thing you really have to be able to access and look at data? That's some of the guidelines and restriction that we were talking about here.
Hey,
and
Dan,
yes, sir.
Real quick, before you move on, we did have a question from the audience. They just a general question. Can you give us a little bit more of a breakdown on what you consider a data silo?
Absolutely. Data silos can happen in my, obviously there's probably others out there way smarter than me that have different definitions of this, to include Merriam-Webster. But the way that I have encountered data silos in my professional career have been both operational and also administrative. Mm-hmm. So data silos can occur operationally, right? Very easily with one or two. So if you have a team, your cyber operations team as a whole, say your threat intelligence analysts they're rock solid and they're bringing everything into Elasticsearch because that matches up with how they're bringing and collecting data from other sources, and that's where they're storing everything, right? But what happens when your SOC operators are using Splunk? And Splunk is their SIEM, for example, and that's where they're tracking all their different alerts and events. It's also where they're putting their blacklists and so forth. That is a data silo that occurs, right? And then also what happens when you have really important tools within your organization, say for dynamic analysis of malware, you're using VMware or Cuckoo, and then you're also using Binary Ninja for static analysis, or Ghidra, NSA tool, open source, check it out. But what happens when you have all those different tools and processes in place, or different resources in place, and they don't talk to each other? Now you have silos that are incredibly crippling, because why would you want to limit a SOC analyst who sees in the SIEM an alert on a given, something triggered, and he's looking at it and happens, or let's use a more banal example. CEO sends you an email and says, this email has an attachment. Can you please verify whether or not I can access and look at this? Well, unless you have access to those tools that typically your reverse engineers would have access to, VMware or Cuckoo for dynamic analysis, and maybe static analysis through Binary Ninja, how are you going to actually take a look at that? You might go to ThreatQuote, some online threat repositories, and check the hash on it, right? But you could also be leaking data, and you could be revealing to adversaries and others the fact that you're onto them and you're tracking them and you're trying to look into it. So that's where QuoLab, I don't want to get into the solution side, but that is a huge data silo that can exist. So tools, resources, and communication between teams. On the administrative side, data silos can occur, and these ones are many times much more damaging at the high level when you're talking about mobilizing resources to address a given threat. Geographical. And you might have a team in Germany working for a large multinational organization. You might have a team in Germany who's working on their incidents and their events, and they're kind of their own little enclave. But part of the same company, you might have them in New York City, and they're working on their little enclave. They might have the same tool set, but if those two databases and those two teams are not talking on the case level, on the threat level, then there's going to be a silo that occurs, and that might not be because the operators might be fully intending on talking with each other, but administratively there might be a block that says no, you can't talk to each other. A real live use case of this. I have to be very careful with which use cases I use from the government sector, but I can use one that kicked off right after 9/11. Right, we have DHS because of that disconnect between the IC and the intelligence community organizations. to share and exchange threat information about terrorists. Same exact scenario happens on the cyber side, for a variety of reasons, and there's a lack of integration and ability to communicate. And a lot of times that comes down to the simple fact that they don't want to give you access to their entire database over here because they don't know, orders, legality reasons and all those things aside. So it'd be incredibly convenient for a threat operator within an organization to be able to just click and print off a PDF or issue a PDF that they can then email at the chain and say, please share this with this team, this organization over there, right? And that can, at the very bare level, erase some of those data, those silos, not just data, but now we're talking administratively. Sorry, I got a little long-winded there, Joel. I hope I answered that.
Perfect. I mean, I did not expect you to dive that deep, but I think what I personally love about your experiences is that you have this tactical, presence about you, this experience that you have in your past, but now you're able to see things from that executive level as well. I mean, it's just such an incredible mix that you could say, look, this one's almost more damaging because you can literally see it and you relate it to your past experiences. It's extremely powerful. So no, keep going. I do have a question for you that's kind of right up the alley. The question was transitioning from a technical background to a CEO in cybersecurity. What were some of the skills you had to develop on the CEO side that you weren't expecting to have to?
Oof, that's such a loaded question. I just got both shotgun barrels at me. To be completely candid with you, my time in the Air Force, I'll qualify my answer to that question by talking a little bit about what helped me as a CEO, right, to be successful. Or at least in my opinion, you'd have to get the final verdict from my team in this area, whether or not they think that's a success. But the time that I spent in the Air Force, and I wasn't an officer, I was enlisted. So the time that I spent as a young buck sergeant and then a sergeant in the Air Force really prepared me in many ways for teaming and leading people. And that combined with some really great mentors, both in the government and also in the military, provided me with a foundation for being able to motivate and encourage folks and to really embrace the concept of leading by doing. I'm not a very traditional CEO. Like, I don't come in, I don't know what traditional means anymore either, by the way, cybersecurity startups and everything else. I don't know if traditional matters anymore, but I'm not stodgy or anything like that. I get into the weeds and I expect my team to challenge me and I challenge them and we go back and forth. But some of the challenges that I specifically had as a CEO that I never experienced, one of them was time management. That was a killer. When you go from having to think about, really time-sensitive, critical operations that you're involved in on a day-to-day basis, to all of a sudden, I now have to worry about those critical time-sensitive operations that, 15 other people are working on a day-to-day basis. And how do we keep those things aligned and organized? And that was a huge challenge for me. And I resolved that challenge by bringing in both right team members. So you're only as strong as the team that you work with. So by bringing, I mentioned Alan, and then I have another guy, Tiago Marquez and Frederick Alstromer, right? Those are my core leadership team, and Demon Nostov, who heads up my infrastructure. By being able to chart out parts of your brain and the workload that you have, right, and share it with a team, and then holding each other mutually accountable for those items, that was the challenges that I really had to overcome. And that one of the big life lessons that I took away after, I would say, a few months of being a CEO was, oh my God, humility is something that you absolutely have to embrace. And humility, especially when it comes to being able to give up the reins and say, I might think I have all the answers, but I trusted this individual to provide me with answers. Why don't I give up the reins and give him, and let him or her make the decisions and see what comes after it, right? Because I trusted them. And sometimes they've not made the calls that I would have chosen. Didn't really matter though, because at the end of the day, we came out on top. And why did we come out on top? Because as a team, we figured out whatever challenges were there and we grew together. Iron sharpens iron, and they trained me and I trained them, and we're rocking and rolling forward.
That's a great answer. Now, you said humility is essential. And I 100% agree, and it's really cool to hear an executive such as yourself bring that to the table. We do have a question that's kind of going to address that, but even though you're humble, in the past few conversations we have had just in preparation for this, I can sense a competitive spirit as well.
Oh God, yeah.
So this is going to come into this next question that we got asked from the community. So Jake had a cake asked this. He said, CEOs normally have tremendous drive, not to mention egos. Where does your drive come from?
So I'm probably going to sound corny as hell when I give you this answer. But my drive as an individual, as a professional, comes from the desire to succeed and excel. And Joel, you weren't very far off when you mentioned that competitive spirit. I am incredibly competitive as an individual. I'm not competitive in the sense that I want to beat other people. I'm competitive in the sense that I want to be as good as that person that I saw. And if that means that I actually become better than them, doesn't happen very often, so be it, right? But I know that I'm improving myself. And the Air Force and military, I've made that disclosure, right? It's going to come shining right through right now when I say this. But the core values of the Air Force, integrity first, service before self, and excellence in all we do, right? That is, my team knows that those are my guiding values and my guiding mantra. And I firmly believe that the only way to keep personal egos and pride and other things in check, which can be very good for motivating, encouraging, and pushing people to become better and better at what they do. I firmly believe, though, that without guiding fundamental concepts or values around those, they tend to run amok, and then you tend to have a lot of problems.
Dan, I honestly, you continue to impress me with each and every answer to these questions. I mean, you've talked about humility, integrity, building core values in a team while guiding people with a competitive spirit to drive that and keep egos in check. I mean, wow. So guys, if you are watching this, I hope you guys are taking notes on what Dan is talking about, because this is extremely powerful stuff. Dan, just for your knowledge, we took a poll not too long ago from this audience, or a similar one, and we said, hey, how many of you see yourself in an executive role, such as CISO? And over 75% said yes, someday they strive to be that. So you're speaking to the right audience. I hope you guys are taking notes. So, all right, Dan, I got to
get to them.
That's right. I got to get us back on track a little bit. We do have more questions about your experiences, so maybe if we have time, we'll circle back around with them after. If not, I'll get you the questions, and you can hit me with them, and I'll after the stream, maybe tomorrow or the day after, we can get them the answers. Deal?
Deal.
Cool.
Sounds great to me.
Cool. So you shared with us some of the problems you saw while you were a blue team member in the Air Force. Talk to me about how you've created QuoLab to help solve them. You ready? Can I bring your next slide back up?
We can either do that, or I can just go off the cuff and talk about how we did it for these exact ones. I mean, that way I can stick to one slide.
Let's do that, but can we do in regards to the demo? Are you ready to show the platform? Because we've had multiple questions on how user-friendly is it? What kind of XDR fit into the XDR space? And I knew you were going to touch on all of this here shortly. So are you ready to kick this into high gear?
I am absolutely ready to kick it in high gear, unless you don't want me to. If you want me to summarize on the solutions, otherwise we can actually address the solutions with audience questions as we go through it. It's up to you.
The slide. Hit them real quick, and then let's jump right into your platform.
All right. I'm not going to hit you guys very hard with this. So and this is more for, after the fact, if you want to look at the video and pause it here and read through there so you can have a better understanding of what we're doing. But the goal is here, as I've talked about VMware, Cuckoo, people, data silos, and all those other things, right, is unifying those threat operations. That's QuoLab's solution, one of the main solution points that we have. The reporting challenges and visualization challenges, we bring intuitive insights and very common sense applications to the way that we build out our visualizations and sharing of that information with others. And then the identifying critical vulnerabilities, much like our other partners are doing, we try and help connect the dots by doing a variety of things with the platform. Like under the hoods, we're doing fuzzy hashing of artifacts. So if you bring in documents, if you bring in executables and so forth, we're going to fuzzy hash those and give you correlations both at the, say, the function level for a piece of malware, or at the like the text-based area alignment, to be able to identify code reuse, and other things between different families and entities to do things like tap propagation and so forth. And by the way, we're doing this with the MITRE ATT&CK framework. We use both the mobile attack, pre-attack, and attack framework within QuoLab at all levels. And then that unified threat management, that's where we're bringing in cases. And you're going to see this in the demo, so I'm not really going to belabor this point too hard because you'll see it when we get in it. And then finally, last but not least, is on-premise delivery. Our on-premise and cloud delivery, by the way. So QuoLab runs, we ship it in a variety of ways. It's Dockerized, and we ship it as either a VMDK or like a virtualized file that you could run in your ESXi cluster. If you have one, like a bunch of servers sitting ready to go. Runs on a laptop, like I mentioned earlier in the conversation, as well as you can run it in, up on AWS, on Azure, Google Cloud. Doesn't really matter. Wherever your data your way, right? But at the end of the day, the important thing here is that we're not charging seats. We're not by seats or users. We're not charging by connectors or volume of data. Straight up, we give you a license. You get the platform and you run it wherever you see fit. We can also host it for you. Typically, we do it up in AWS. But you get the keys to the kingdom, and we're not going to be, that's not a preferred delivery method. We want you to be able to own the platform. We'll support in every way throughout the path, but that's about pretty much where it ends, right?
I just have to say thank you. Like,
what's that?
Just thank you for not charging per login. Just thank you for just going license based.
Joel, that's the stuff that pissed me off as an operator. You know what I mean? Like whenever I would try to get access to something and be like, oh, you've exceeded your seat or your query limit for the month or something like that. I'm like,
I just can't.
Are you serious?
Oh.
No, I can't do it. Yeah.
Did you see that? So I appreciate you and the team, whoever made that decision. Fantastic. So, all right.
I'm looking at him.
I think our audience is too. They keep asking me questions about your platform. They want to see it, Dan. So stop sharing your screen. Share again with your browser or the demo or the whatever you're going to be showing here. And I'm going to ask you one more question. Actually, nope, you already got it pulled up. You ready to go?
Yes, sir. I'm ready to go, but you can ask a question while they're looking at some basic dashboards. It's your call.
This is an interesting one. Did you ever do anything to get on top, and by on top, get into COO, that you regret, or maybe the way you treated someone? It's kind of personal, but it's good that we answer this before we get into your platform.
That's life is full of regrets, right? I don't think there's anybody on this call, and if you don't have regrets, I think you're deluding yourself, right? I think that everybody knows that they could have done something better at a certain point or time in their life. Do I have regrets? Absolutely. I have, sometimes with the best of intentions, you can steamroll over people. I'm a CEO, right? And I didn't get here by not being ambitious and not being in the good way, right? And not taking charge and taking care of business for myself and the people that I work with and so forth. So I do have definite regrets about some of the decisions that I made along the way. Not trying to be obtuse about it or dance around it, but I can also say this though. You can't make everybody happy in your life. And if you try to do that, especially as a CEO, you realize that you're going to fall into some pits that I fell into. And that's where I was trying to make too many people happy with, positions or promises for the future and stuff like that, where the realities of business and the realities of running the company didn't allow me to make those choices that I personally would have loved to make for them. I had to make the best decision in terms of what was good for the company. So I have regrets for maybe setting their expectations too high instead of being more transparent and saying that these things that I would love to give you are not on the table because of X, Y, Z reason, or I can't even tell you the reason because it's behind confidentiality agreements. So in that context, absolutely, I do have regrets. Do I have regrets though overall for how I got here? No, because I believe that every single person, we're all members of a team, and I got here with the support of that team. I didn't get here by, crushing other people and saying, I want to be at the head and I'm going to be the person running the show. It was more of a logical, they turned to me and said, Dan, would you mind stepping into this position? And me going back to my wife and saying, are you ready for this? And her going, hell no, but let's do it, right?
I love it.
Yeah. So,
and you live by your values, right? You live by the integrity. You live through humility. you've already spoken to those things. So, it's something I've had a hard time with, though, is, exactly what you said. You said, look, being able to take the personal out of it and think about what's best for the business, that's difficult to do coming from a technical role, right? Or a individual contributor role. So I love it. Great answer, Dan. Let's pivot this back to you and QuoLab. I'm going to throw this up on the screen. Show us what you got. I'm excited.
So, you're looking at our dashboards. That's it. We're done. Just kidding. So these dashboards are just basically showing you some. And by the way, I have this zoomed in a little bit. So I mean, we can. I don't want to make it too hard for people to see the data on the screen. Is that too zoomed out, Joel? Can people still see it?
Let me see. There we go. I threw a different view in, so it should be good. I can read it from here, so I think they can as well.
Outstanding. So basically, this is just tracking all the different, by time slice and stuff, the different data coming in from my connectors. And at the top, we have some system statistics. You can configure these to have dashboards based off of your users, your cases, and so on and so forth. This is a demo system, so it's only got a couple of users on it. That would be a very boring dashboard to put up, so I don't put that up there. But what you have is, so basically a platform, right, that is obviously sourcing and bringing in a lot of data. And then doing a bunch of different things with it. Well, how is it bringing that data in? And I like to start with looking from the outside and then going into QuoLab. So the way that we bring data into QuoLab is threefold. You have the manual upload. So when you go into a case, and we'll get in there in a second, I'll show you that, you can right click and upload files from pretty much wherever, right? In bulk as well. But then we have the REST API, and I have our documentation here within the QuoLab platform. Oh boy, I thought I had it. That's embarrassing. So right here, basically everything I can do with the user interface that you're going to watch me going through and doing, you can pretty much do on the back end. So if you wanted to do create timelines and add events to those, we give you all the different samples and parameters, as well as the over here sample code on how to exactly do that. So the REST API is it's bidirectional. It's both in and out on data. So you can configure whatever you want to come in, as well as have QuoLab do XYZ enrichment automation, and then pull that data back out and say, push it back out to my Elasticsearch instance, if that's what your use case is, right?
Well, and then Dan, real quick, I got to interrupt, because for those of you watching, if API first is like the new thing, right? And everybody's striving for that. But you would be amazed how many companies still are not API first. So the fact that you've opened up that back end to all being driven by all APIs, that's fantastic, Dan. I love it every time I see that.
Joel, it's what pissed me off again about not having that kind of an access, and also my team. I mean, you ask any of the people on my team, they're like, why the heck is the API not available whenever we go to integrate with something? And we've actually worked with some of our partners on integrations to say, hey, can you please configure your REST API to be able to do X, Y, and Z thing? And then go, oh yeah, sure, we've never had anybody ask for that, but they do it. And then I realize other people are now using it, right? So the preferred method to get data into QuoLab outside of the REST API, right? REST API is for the ninjas that like to use the command line and not work within a user interface or a platform like this, is VR connector framework. And so I'm going to go in here and just show you some of the connectors that we have on this specific node. QuoLab ships with, out of the box, by the way, a bunch of external data feeds. So these are all via pre-configured connectors. And you have like Spam House, and you have URL House, you have Virus Total, for enrichment, for example, Shodan.
So pause.
I'm sorry?
So pause. Somebody spins up, they buy a license. Automatically, all of these are turned on and enabled?
Correct. Yep. Yes, sir.
Cool. So are you able to zoom in just a hair on that by any chance?
I can see. Yeah, there you go.
Cool. There we go. So these external feeds are integrations, more or less, right?
Yeah. So if I look at the Spam House one, right, I can just quickly show you what it's looking like. So this is the endpoint for Spam House. It's querying and pulling every 24 hours from that and giving you all the different data. But if I look at the connector, for example, so you can see, there it is. That's where it's pulling from, and it's parsing in the JSON.
I love it.
And QuoLab handles the rest, right? So it's just creating a connector, by the way, is just simply a matter of click add, and then choosing what connector you need, right? What do you want to use in the platform? And because I'm zoomed in so far, this is becoming annoying.
Yeah, but so what I'm seeing though is I see, can read a few of those off for me. What are kind of the crowds?
I got the Shodan, Syncpot, Snowflake, SourceFire, Splunk, Taxi, Tor, URLs. Oh, by the way, QuoLab also is pulling Tor. So depends on how many connectors. So we're pulling like from dan.shodan or dan.tor.uk, as well as several other known Tor broadcast nodes. And so QuoLab is constantly alerting and updating itself on the available Tor nodes, which led to a hilarious incident with one of our first clients. They installed it on Friday afternoon because, you always install things Friday afternoon. 100%. That's when you always do your rollouts, right? So we do the rollout from on Friday afternoon, and then I get a nasty email or freaking out email. It was a little bit snarky too. Why the hell is your system broadcasting and connecting to Tor on Friday? And they said, we're shutting this thing off and we're going back to the security side to talk to them. So we come back in on Monday. I had to get them on the horn and be like, I'm sorry, I didn't, we thought it was a great idea. We didn't let you know that it's doing this. All it's doing is pulling to say every 5 minutes, what are the available Tor nodes out there? So we're racking and stacking and storing those. So as they age off, they're no longer part of the Tor network, or as new ones come in the Tor network, then if you're looking at log files, for example, and you're doing a time slice analysis, then you'll see outbound connectivity to a Tor node that's been verified as of that time slice, right? Yep. So we're doing this, and they were like, oh, thank God. Thanks for telling us this, but you really should put that in your documentation. And we went as a young startup, check, we're going to do that, and it's in there now, right? So
it's so important to know those Tor nodes and when they are active Tor nodes, because we see all kinds of bouncing between different Tor nodes. As a security analyst, you have to have that integration, and I don't see it often, to be honest with you, Dan.
Yeah, and we find it very valuable. It's an incident response thing, right, in a SOC operator type of workflow that they need to have. One of the other things that we do here is, like, this is our Snowflake connector, right? So you could the connector is built here. We didn't build this because, we wanted to. We built it, we wanted to make our client happy, and that's what happened. Our client came to us and said, could you please build this Snowflake connector? So for a frame of reference, for those in the audience that want to know how long does it take for us to build a connector, first off, we charged them, I think it was like $3,000 to build a connector. And then we reimbursed it when we realized that we're just going to share it with everybody because it actually worked fantastically for them, and it'll probably work well for our other clients. So if we build a connector that our other clients are going to be using, first off, you don't pay for it. If we build a specific data connector for something internally, well, then of course we don't charge an overhead. We just charge straight up the dev hours that it would take. This thing took us, for a team of 2 that were working on it, 48 hours to build.
Wow. That's pretty cool. That's fast for an integration.
It's fast for an integration, and it's the only reason we can do it that fast, to be honest with you, is because much like our REST API has all that fleshed out capability, the same with our connector framework, right? We have a very vast slew of resources and use case is already built into the backend framework, the graph data model, automation pipelines, and so forth, right? That say, I need a connector to do this. We're like, oh, okay, yeah, we've already built 3 connectors that do something very similar. Here's a little special sauce that we have to do for this connector, and we get it out the door, right? So that's what happened with Snowflake.
That's so
there's
cool.
A whole. Now, do you want me to bore you with the user, like the administrative interface and all that?
Is it unique to QuoLab the way you do it?
One thing that is unique, and I'll bore you for a second. I find it interesting because as a prior Govy, and people in the financial sector might find it interesting. Others may not find it as interesting, but our roles, so our access controls. QuoLab has a very, very well-versed and defined access control list, basically what users are allowed to do and not do. So some users, you can strictly have a user account that is allowed to create connectors. That's it. They can't interact with the data. They can't add, see things, delete, do whatever. Other users can only read. So if you have junior analysts and you don't want to give them the ability to maybe download malware from the platform onto their local system, and infect your entire organization, let's do that, right? And then you have reporters, all up the chain, right? Different capabilities.
Then a script editor on there, so it looks like you guys get really granular on your RBAC. So I appreciate that. And,
it's an operator platform, Joel. That's and it's tailored for the users that the day-to-day grunts that are like myself that are going to be pounding the keyboard on this thing, right? You can put users into groups, and then, by the way, I get asked this all the time for authentication. You can either use QuoLab's internal authentication server, or you can use like LDAP, LDAP3, that kind of thing.
Awesome. Cool.
So, one last thing for just wanted to push this out there. So like for updates right now, I just checked this thing's up to date. Up here, you have the import offline update file. That is because QuoLab is capable of working in air-gapped environments. So that's why I wanted to highlight this really quick. So you can bring in a USB stick or whatever you have access to, connect to that system, and you can do your updates that way. Download them offline, bring them across, that air-gapped environment, and then upload offline.
I love it. I love it. Well, and so you got to realize that a lot of companies cannot do that, right? You have to outbound connection. So that's a really good ad.
And that's, CPTs targeting directly the needs and the use cases of military members, which, by the way, is not very different than a lot of the super secret squirrel sauce that organizations are doing when it comes to counterintelligence within the business sector. They have the need to be in air-gapped environments where they know for a fact that their private, crown jewels are not going to be leaked out. So that's why we built QuoLab to support those kind of, those kind of operations. And if you look, one of the things because of that offline update, I wanted to highlight. So QuoLab is Dockerized and containerized. So there's a whole freaking slew of things that are going on here, right? I'm scrolling through a very fast list, but like TLSH for fuzzy hashing, you can see that it's kicked off, it's operating, right? There's a bunch of different, let's go in here, Raven, a bunch of QuoLab internal stuff, boring stuff, right, on the front. But what that tells you is QuoLab is actually sharding out all the different processes and capabilities. And we have 4, so in this instance, this is a four core system that this QuoLab node is running on. 3 of those cores are available for workers, so as data comes in and all so forth. And then 1 of them is system reserved, and it's handling all the back end. And it does it pretty well. But now let's get out of the administration, if you don't mind, and let's get maybe back to some of the fun stuff.
Yeah, let's do it.
And let me zoom us back out to where it's halfway decent on the screen here. If I need to zoom back in, let me know. So the all that data, we just talked about how it comes in and all that, right? That data comes in and it's going to go into the case list, and it's not going to be overtly displayed. So some of the data can be compartmentalized in cases that are not being rendered in the UI for obvious reasons.
So hold on. Back up just a little bit. So what I'm looking at now is this data coming in from all my connectors.
This is data that's coming from connectors. So like this binaries to analyze, I have a connector that's actually feeding me different binaries, and these are specifically linked to some analysis that we're doing on a couple currently, how can I say this? Operations that are currently ongoing, right, and affecting a lot of different organizations and companies. So we have a data feed that's where they just hit and they store there. So whether my REST API is pushing it there, whether my connector is pushing it there, or I'm putting data there manually, right? That's where it's going. So let me blow this out because that this makes it a little easier to see these things. So like I have a hidden Cobra case, right? And this tracks the entirety of all the data that we have from hidden Cobra within it, and with a whole bunch of different folders blown out in there. And if you notice at the top, I have hidden Cobra and Turla. Those are the 2 use cases that we're going to dive into and look at the data and see what does that mean when you have QuoLab data in QuoLab. One of the things I wanted to highlight before I pop off of this, though, is this case graph. And I know it's a little hard to read those with the zoom level that we're at right now. But essentially, what you can start seeing at this high level, I have basically 3 different groupings of data. And that's because at the top you have the Cobalt related threat actor groups, and then down here at the bottom you have like Turla and others. So QuoLab itself is giving you at this very high level some really good information. You can add this to your report if you wanted to, like at the high level, and say, this is what our QuoLab node is saying. Now I'm going to drill into the data and do XYZ thing. But from this, you can open up as many cases as you want. The rendering is happening browser side. So this is on my laptop right now. So I've got queries pulling the data back from AWS, but all the different tools, like what you see here on the right, are my tools. The link analyzer, and by the way, we do have magic. So you had a nice little sound effect there. We got magic. It's called Magic Parser.
Hold on.
But
no, I keep hitting the birds. I apologize. Magic Parser.
There we go. Thank you, Magic Parser. So yeah, you have a bunch of different tools that allow you to interact with the data on the left. The data on the left is what you would expect to see from a like your Internet Explorer, or sorry, your File Explorer within your operating system. It's just basically users can define, or your connectors can define, depends on how you want to do it, different folders. So if it's a SIEM feeding me alerts and incidents, they would be case would be actually the SIEM name, right? The connector. So if it's Splunk, and then you'd have folders, and those could be based off of alerts, foldering by alerts, or by events and incidents that have been tracked. So all the data that comes in here, notice these executables, for example, in these PDFs, these are, when it says exe without the exclamation mark, these are the actual malware executables. And I could just really quickly download it if I wanted to send it to somebody else, or use it offline. Notice it's zipped up, so I can't, just go execute that. So the password is infected if anybody needs it. So if I give you malware, a zip file, just run infected and double click whatever's inside of it, and you'll be off to the races. I'm sure it'll work out really good for you. So one of the use cases, right? What can you do with QuoLab? How can I start looking at data? And one of the things that annoyed the hell out of me when I was an operator was the inability to take awesome documents with a lot of threat intelligence data in them, right? There's a ton of different information here that's very valuable, but I want to say, what do I know about it? So if I go back to my other tools, I take that same PDF and I drop it in my link analyzer. Because QuoLab is managing and processing every single artifact that comes into it, right now I have all the different host names extracted from that document, right? And I can go in here and say, oh, really? Let's look at one.
It pulled in that document. It extracted all of the indicators, and then it builds the links.
Correct, automatically. All this is happening automatically. Right now, I just kicked off Shodan to tell me a little bit about ver.it, because I don't know much about it. I want to know a little more information about it. Look at this. I can take a look at the reference and resourced pieces of malware in there. This is, by the way, you can change the way, you can select multiple items and drag them around, say, I want to look at this, put it over here, or, let's just not show it at all. Let's get rid of it. And then we got some nice little happy orphans over there, right? But what you can do is, now I can bring this up. Now I have a list of all the different data that was contained within that PDF. Now I can just copy and extract these if I wanted to, add them to my case, add them to a different folder, wherever I need to, right click on them, add them via actions. I can push them to another case. I can push it wherever I wanted to, right? So the ability is to be able to take, the concept is to be able to take all that really cool data in here, extract that data out, and then be able to truly start digging into my organization and looking at it. One of those examples is like a malware analysis, right? If I, actually, before I go to malware analysis, because I like to end that up with the reporting tool, I'm going to show you the magic tool, because your sound effects just made it too cool. So
as soon as you drop it, I'm ready.
So you want me to, okay, as soon as I drop, let me grab the text. So what I'm doing is I'm grabbing a, if I could grab it, where did it go? There it is. So anybody who is an operator has probably experienced the pain of going through crap like this. This is a log file, right? And I'm just copying the entire contents of that log file. And this log file is a outbound connections from a firewall. That's what we're looking at here. So now I'm going to open the magic parser. Thank you. Piece of the data in, and then I'm going to scan it with magic, right? So all funniness aside, this is just basically going through and doing string searches, right? Regex and a couple other things to go through. And by the way, it's going to defanging. So if it senses, like, how you posted the link to this chat in LinkedIn and you defanged the URL, right, with the brackets, it's going to recognize that structure and it's going to defang the defanging and then render it back in here in a way that QuoLab in this application can use to interact with it.
Oh, that's
yeah, so any text data this works with, right? So log files, PDFs, documents, whatever have you, it dumps it in here. And now you can see the full-blown URLs, IP address, and all that. I'm going to quickly sort this and say, give me, show me everyone that I have hits with. Well, now I have all these IP addresses here. I'm just going to take a group of them and say, okay, I mean, I could take all of them and do this. And by the way, I'm doing this manually.
Dan, though, we got to take a step back for our audience members. So, guys, you may not see the importance of this, but let's imagine this was all in a table, right? And you're pulling tables and you're trying to curate the data, and you may know how to be able to do it, right? If I ask Sec IT guy to do that and to manipulate a SQL query so that it's filtered in a certain way or only showing certain features, he could do it. But what about all the new guys on the team? They may not be able to. So what he could do is he could take a log file, dump it in here, and then the team can sort it however they need to. And this is, I mean, super intuitive. It already automatically parses it.
Mm-hmm.
That's extremely valuable, especially if it's already building it into the QuoLab. You can literally from there double click and you're off to the races with your visualizations. Really cool.
Off to the races with visualization, adding it to the database on the back end, right? Wherever this case is being stored, say it's in my Elasticsearch instance, I can add those to it and build out the threat intelligence, build out whatever I need to, or for other use cases, right? Thank you for that point, Joel. Very, very insightful. And along with that, by the way, I just did a bulk query of my entire holdings without having to add anything to my database. So this is all still in memory, right? Within the UI, within the browser instance. None of this has been committed and added to anything. And furthermore, I'm just going to say, QuoLab, okay, it's very nice that you told me that I know something about this. But open it up in Link Analyzer, and then I'm going to tell QuoLab to start, let's blow this out of the way so we can have a nice little prettier view of the data. Now I have all 4 of these IP addresses. Let's set this in a hierarchical layout so I can see something a little more important. What about this? What do I now see? All 3 of these IP addresses, right? What I now know, they are actually being reported on IPsum blacklist. That's one of my threat intelligence data connectors. This data should automatically now be forwarded right to my threat intel, or sorry, my sysadmins who are managing that appliance and say, why is this, what's going on? Why did I miss this? Add it to it, whatever you need to do. And the same with all the other artifacts that were in this list, right? If I kept opening up all of these, I bet you money, a bunch of them are going to have that same thing. Now, this is a very manual driven process. You can do this automatically on the back end, right? You have logs being scanned and analyzed by QuoLab and having the same functionality be reported out in a variety of formats. Speaking of reporting out, I'm going to hit that right now. So, Turla, we're switching gears just a little bit more. We're going to look at something that's a little more data centric, like malware centric, right? So if you have a piece of malware, it's really interesting to run static, dynamic, and other processes against it to be able to find out a bunch of things. Some of the stuff that you learn about a specific, like this executable right here. For example, QuoLab is telling us that this executable creates and then loads this process on the local system. I can see the certificate for it. I can tell in QuoLab, by the way, none of this was done manually. QuoLab, as soon as I uploaded this executable, it's kicking off and doing these things for me, this enrichment, right? So that dynamic analysis, QuoLab, it drops these, contains these 3 other files, an ASCII file, an executable, and a bin file. And because it's recursively going through and doing this on everything, I can start blowing this out and saying, oh, look at this executable. It's also identified as a malware file. Well, why don't I change my view to be hierarchical so I can see these 2 in parallel? And let's get rid of this because it makes more sense. Make it bigger for everybody. There you go. So now I see the PDF, the original PDF that we were given to. It was a piece of malware that was emailed to somebody. We loaded up in QuoLab. QuoLab extracted this executable, and then it told us all this other things about that executable. It's telling me that, by the way, speaking about tags, or how's that for tags? There's all your malware, your MITRE attack tags that are associated with this thing. So it's telling us a whole bunch of information, essentially that are considered IOCs, indicators of compromise. We can use these now to identify not only just this file, but the other subset files that it creates on a local system. If you're looking at it from like an EDR type perspective or a hunting perspective. From a reporting instance, we can tell you what families this is linked to, as well as I can keep driving into the functions. So this one has 41 links to functions. I can blow that out, and I know it doesn't look very nice right there, but each of those individual functions is now blown out for me in all their glory. For me, if I was a malware reverse engineer, I could look at them. But real quick, we're going to pivot and say, okay, this isn't maybe the best view. So let's go into the artifact details. And this page, I'm going to zoom that in because that's a little hard to see. This page gives you the overall like MIME type, SHA-1, 256, and all those other different unique identifiers for it. A little bit of file information like its portable executable and all that. But I can also check this out, similarity. this is immediately telling me QuoLab is identified based off of fuzzy hashing that this file matches 88% to this other file, which has these known tags for it. And what if I wanted to, I could, which I do want to, I'm going to load up those two tools side by side. And I'm sorry, and my apologies for clicking and swishing around here. But look here on the left-hand side, you have that, there, let's get it cleaner. There you go. You have those. And now I have this 88 percentile match file. I'm just going to drag it over here, and I want to say, what other relation does this file have to those? Well, the reality is that that was this file right here that I was already looking at. So it's already telling me that. But the same thing applies. And by the way, I'm clicking and flipping through here, and I hope I'm not making anybody sick while I'm doing this.
I'm tracking.
Yeah, but watch this. I'm going to drop in another executable. I'm going to tell it, tell me everything that you know about it. Well, lo and behold, that PDF also contained this other executable. And if I wanted to, we could start blowing out. If I'm not going to do it right now because 1,200 functions is going to be kind of a nasty. But if I bring this up, check this out. Now I have all those different facts, all those different IOCs, and I can simply go up here and export those as CSV or JSON. If I wanted to hand it to somebody in that manner, I could save it as an image, a PDF, or I could add it to as a view, static view within my case. More importantly, though, with a reporting tool, here's how I can convey this information. Both the other stuff that we're looking at in Cobra, the artifacts that we're looking at here, the executables in Turla, right? This tool we built specifically based off of client requests to say, can you give us a better way to look at and visualize data? And that is for sharing, right? So I can create another case by going to the create case, and I can give it whatever name I want, modify it, you know, tag it. I can identify it as, say, like this, if this was an adversary that I want to do a report on and so forth, give it all that different tagging information, right? Here's all the MITRE ATT&CK tagging that we have access to. So I can just click on and put it in there. TLP, let's say it's a green, right? Mm-hmm. What happens is just by creating this, I'm going to go back to one that's already pre-created just for ease of, instead of you guys having to watch my horrible typing skills. But I'm going to zoom this out just a little bit. Now I have a reporting tool, and QuoLab emphasizes this concept of thirds. So we like to, when we zoom and shift data and screenshots back and forth, whatever, that we do it in thirds. And I can also go full screen. But right now you have a markdown-based report that we're building. I have direct references to those executables. I have in here the link analysis. So that's that image that we were just looking at right there. By the way, all these artifacts, if I wanted to add more artifacts, is drag and droppable, just like everything else in the system. So I can bring in, I'm sorry.
That is so cool that you can, I mean, I love that, because you know how much copy and paste analysts do old reports? Like, man, just if it's like 4 or 5 IOCs, I'm like typing out, you know, everybody's got to type out abstract.
Who wants to type out this IP address or try and highlight, copy that hash and then dump it in there? Nobody wants to do that, right? Why in the hell would I want to do that? And so, and if I'm bringing in, here's my source data. So I went to this dark reading and I pulled in the actual text from it, and I'm giving them credit, right, with a hyperlink, and they can, users can, you'll see what'll happen. But right now I'm in an incredibly operator-friendly viewing mode. This is basically Vim on steroids, right? With some basing, I can add sections. You know, if I wanted to add in totally a whole new sketch, section 5, give it a title and everything, I can do whatever I need to here, right? And what that gives me is the ability to then go up here, and I'm going to publish my report. And now I have the user rights. Remember ACLs that we were talking about way earlier, access controls. I could have limited my user to being able to create a draft, and then another user would have to approve. But boom, now you have that report, and I have to zoom it out so you can see the whole thing on the screen. But there's a, there you go. I'm going to zoom in just so you can see. This is white labelable. So your organization logo, whoever owns the QuoLab node can put their logo in there, and it'll pre-populate with the background images, change it. You know, if orange is not your thing, I don't know why it wouldn't be, but if orange is not your thing, you can be happy here. And there's all that information that we were pre-populating. And then check it out. Just like you would expect, it's a hyperlinked enabled document, pre-sorted, everything done there with those exact screenshots that we were just taking a look at earlier, right? So all that data is there for you to look at, source data, everything that I need, analyst comments, whatever. And
So
to top it all off, go ahead, Joel.
Top it all off first, and then I got a question.
Sure thing. So to top it all off, we said it doesn't just make sense to be able to create this report. We wanted anybody who had access to this physical report to be able to do what we call report in reverse. So say you give this to your CISO and he says, I don't know about that. I want to take a deeper look in it, because he happens to be a C-suite that's operational like myself, right? And he's going to go double check people. So you just click on the actual, there's a hyperlink behind that. And look what just happened. We had this QuoLab node we were working in. It opened up a fresh QuoLab node for me. Here's that entire report blown out, just like the analyst and the reporter made it. And then over here, you have access to those exact executables that I can just now start looking at. I'm going to get rid of that report. Now I can start going through that same exact data, right? And take a look at those and do whatever I need to do with them. To include adding in other enrichment and then making a modification to this report that I can then publish again with serialized numbers.
Well, so I love this. And you went straight to CISO. I got to take it a step back, though, because as an individual contributor, right, if you're a SOC analyst or a security analyst, and by the way, we have a ton of questions that we have not gotten to yet. So people are loving this. They got questions for you, all kinds. But you got to realize, SOC analyst, you're building this out. You're tracking this down. You know you have an incident that's been, whether phishing, it doesn't matter what it is. But as soon as you finish your report, it's not going to the CISO first. It's going to your team lead first.
Correct.
They want to analyze it. So being able to click into there's perfect. Well, they could maybe add a few things, do an additional research. They may have different permissions or maybe better, not better, but a different skill set to add to that. They can then create a report, send that to the SOC lead who can do the same thing. And then by the end, you're reporting that to the CISO. That's powerful functionality. I dig it.
And it's exactly, Joel. And essentially you have all the artifacts that you were talking about in that report consolidated in that report now as a case, essentially what's happening behind the scenes, right? So I can always go back to the tech. If this grew to like 150 different items because people kept iterating off this report or adding to this case, to this report case, which by the way, then QuoLab automatically republishes a new version of it. I mean, it just makes interacting and doing, you know what, I hate to say this, but like Microsoft tools are trying to do when you check in and out documents, getting rid of all that banality and the confusing, cluttered way of which it's doing it, and just saying, let's make it simple. Keep it in the same platform and framework. You don't got to go Microsoft Word to have something that looks like that. You know what I mean?
Today, most people do. Just being real with you, but that's really cool. So thank you and team, whoever helped with this. It's fantastic. Now let's get a couple real quick. Does it have a feature to escalate risks to notify management?
Absolutely. So you can do a variety of things in here. So if I wanted to, on an executable, for example, if I wanted to, you can either add this, you can comment on it, and you can also add it to a timeline. So right now I only have one timeline. So great freaking question that showed a functionality of the platform that I didn't really go into and talk about. But I'm going to create a new timeline that says escalation. So, and I'm going to say, by the way, in our company, Bob is always at fault. So Bob's, if there's anybody named Bob on this on the stream, my apologies. But so if Bob needs to take a look at something, that's what happens. So I just created a timeline, right? And now I'm going to say add these items to that same timeline, and that timeline is going to be my escalation ones that I need people to take a look at. I can assign users to that timeline, not just myself. If I go up here in my timelines, let me minimize as well this over here. Now I have the escalation for those, and there's every one of those IP addresses zeros right there with that escalation clause. So then these can be these are system artifacts that are being tracked. We call these timelines. They're cards that are basically timestamp information, alert you when something happens to it. So if I go in here on this escalation timeline, I could take that same executable and say I'm going to send it to TLSH for hashing. When that comes back, I'm going to get another card that identifies that for me. That this is that TLSH hashing or whatever you were doing. Like go to URL house. When that's done, when the system resolves it, right there. See endpoint URL house file? I have that. It's queued. It's been executed. The URL house file was executed and queued. When the results come back, I have it.
I love it, because then you're not going outside the tool. Your tool, you're sending it. When it's back, it's there. It's updated. You can assign the right people. I think you answered that question perfectly. Now, there is a question I got to jump back in time a little bit for that I've kind of been holding off. But California 909 said, when your clients that host their own QuoLab deployment in AWS or other cloud platforms, do you assist them to secure their deployment?
Absolutely. So great question on how we do the deployments too, by the way. We do, so our team has a lot of practice doing this, right? And some organizations are way better at us than doing that. And actually, we have a partnership with several organizations, specifically on the government deployment and training side. But for our corporate sector clients that would like to assistance, for example, in setting this up, we absolutely do rollout and deployment support with them as part of the purchase price. So whenever I quote a QuoLab Note price to an organization, that includes training and onboarding, as well as setup and configuration assistance. And if you happen to have a very unique environment, I'm not going to gouge you to get it rolling for you, because guess what? I want to make sure you're happy as a client. So it might be a little old school centric mindset, but customer service and customer satisfaction are absolutely focuses and drivers of Alan and myself, and insofar as how we interact with our clients. So that means we will do whatever we have to do to help you to get it up and running. To include our training, which is a day and a half. We can break that out in hour sections if you want over a course of a month, like one of our clients did. But we support you with admin. So our admin documentation is pretty well fleshed out, but there's a lot of users that just want extra support with going through and saying, how do I, how am I adding a group? Well, if the documentation here wasn't enough for you, the training will go through it and explain everything to you and how you need to do that, right? But we have robust training in place, as well as support for if you need, even at the bare level, assistance with creating an ESXi stack internally. We can also work with you on doing that.
Very cool. And so quick question. Now, I don't believe you guys don't have a community edition, correct?
Unfortunately, my apologies to the community here. We do not have a blanket edition that would service you all. But what we do have is free POVs. So proof of value. If you want to pay me for proof of concept, I'm happy to do that as well. But if you reach out to us, we're very happy to get you set up with an AWS instance. That can be, it's private, right? It's only going to be your data. And after the POV time frame, typically about 2 weeks is done, we just blow it away and reset it, right? So no need to worry about who's accessing it, that being shared or passed on to anybody else. But yes, we absolutely offer our free trials of the platform.
Cool. I love it. So I think, guys, community, if you are in a security operations center where this does look like it's something you'd be interested in, free POV trial, check it out, reach out to Dan Young. Now, question, talk to me about target market, just really, really quick. Who are your main clients, not by name, but MSSP, government? Where do you sit? What
verticals are we hitting? Yeah. Verticals on the government side, definitely, my background in a lot of the things I said going through this, it's not hard to see that we are definitely targeting and would love to get this rolled out for government and military. Absolutely, right? That is big and forefront in our outreach and marketing efforts. The other user groups, though, that we are targeting specifically are going to be either large organizations. Think multinational or organizations that have at least a pretty established SOC center, or they're building one out, right? And they're trying to say, we need help with getting off the ground running in the right way. So what that means is our sector is pretty vast, but if it's an organization that has a security operations center need or an incident response need or any of those things that we were just mentioning before, combined with the need to scale across a lot of different in size, definitely in our market segment. But outside of those are like individual clients, right, that come to us and buy our product. And a lot of our success in that area has been with financial sector institutions, as well as think like microcontroller or organizations that are tailored more in They have an on-prem. By the way, these are the reasons that they're coming to us first, and they're going to like our competitors. Like King and Union has an amazing product, their Avalon product, but it is SaaS, right? That's why they're not going to them. They're coming to us because they're saying you guys are on-prem, right? Outside of that, those commercial clients, MSSPs are a huge client of ours, and a huge focus of our use cases. Much like the CPTs, they have that very similar kind of mindset, right? Where they're a team working on a bunch of different clients, and they have the need to compartmentalize, shred that data out, and then still manage it cohesively across the whole.
Well, and with your reporting feature, like that's like MSSP gold, right? Find something, add it to case, escalate artifacts if needed, add it to report, export report, send it off. Hey, here's what we found.
Yes,
triage, booms, get this to your CISO, and then get us your feedback. What are the next steps? So fantastic. Yeah, a few more questions. We did get a interesting comment, really. Somebody said, hey, it seems like enterprise security is kind of a lot of bureaucracy. Comments on that?
That's a landmine and a half.
That is.
What's your thought on that, Joel?
At times, absolutely. I think it depends on the team you're a part of. I think it depends on the leadership you have, whether they're technical, policy-driven, whether they're risk-based or, audit-based, right? How do they drive the organization? So yeah, absolutely. And once again, enterprises, we're talking huge gaps and differences in tool sets. Yeah, that's my thoughts.
Maturity levels and absolutely, yeah.
Yeah,
but political, absolutely. I mean, it can be.
Yeah, it can be. So no, great question. So, Dan, thank you so much for coming on. I mean, you not only provided insight into the community on, starting in as a technical individual, going up to being the CISO. You talked about the things that you needed to implement, from integrity to humility to be successful at your job. You also talked about some of the regrets and maybe speed bumps you went throughout your career over. So thank you for your time. We appreciate you. Will you close us out today with any final thoughts?
Yeah, Joel, I really appreciated the comments here. I was in the questions. Really insightful group, and I hope I run across you all in one form or another. Walk up. I'm a handshaker, fist bumper, whatever, elbow tapper, whatever we got to do. But if we see each other, love to have a conversation with each and every one of you. And Joel, thank you so much for having me on board. It's been a blast. Way more challenging than I thought it would be. So rock on, brother. Thanks for doing that.
Hey, man, we're just here to uncover QuoLab. Thank you so much for joining us on Uncover Cyber. Thank you guys out in the audience for the questions, for the interactions, for the community. Please, please, please link up with Dan Young on LinkedIn or myself, Joel Bork, at Uncover Cyber. Thank you so much, Dan. Once again, have a great rest of your evening, and I'll see you on LinkedIn. See you, everybody.
Rock on, brother.